Chapter 10 is the last chapter in our textbook. And this chapter answers the question that you might have, you might not have, but so far we've talked about all these different types of technology. Everything from networks to databases, information systems, functional systems, ERP, CRM, decision support systems. We've covered a lot of ground, and the big question is, okay, so how do we get it? Most of the time you're already out there working. There are systems that are already in place. Let's say, okay, now we see there's a new option. How are we going to get the new system, the better system? What is the right method for making the change and the transition? So the closing chapter is about how to acquire the information systems and applications. Let's move on down here to this slide, this information systems planning process. You've got your organizational mission that has to drive everything. It all has to be tied to your mission. If it's not supporting the mission of the organization, then you really need to question whether or not you need the system. You need to spend the money to purchase the system. You want to spend the money to maintain the system. And whatever it is, if it's not going to support your mission, then you really need to question it. So once you've got your mission, you also do a business assessment of your current situation, which is going to create your organizational strategic plan, saying basically, we are at point A, but we want to be at point B. Now, how is our plan going to get us there? What is the plan going to be? Part of that plan is going to involve technology, because many times technology is the enabler that helps to move you from point A to point B. So as you establish your strategic plan, you need to do an assessment of your current technology architecture and your infrastructure. Now what you want to look at from here is say, okay, organization is at point A and we're at point B. To get to point B, we need this certain type of information architecture and infrastructure, but we don't have it. So from there, you're going to channel down to your IS strategic plan, which is the plan that's going to support your organization as it's moving forward strategically from where you are today to where you hope to be tomorrow. You're going to develop new information technology infrastructure, you're going to have an operational plan, and you're finally going to develop the projects that are all going to support, back up the chain, the organizational mission. All the way through this process, it's always good to double check and ask at many different times and make sure, are we still supporting the mission? Is what we are planning here, is it still supporting the strategic plan? Or have we gotten off base? Because I've been in these meetings, we're doing a IT strategic plan right now for the University of West Georgia, and sometimes these meetings can get long, and you do a lot of thinking, you do a lot of reading. And sometimes you get off base. Sometimes you get off base and go in a certain direction, and you always need to double check to make sure that everything is tying back. This involves a lot of people. We're actually in the process of conducting town hall meetings across the colleges to gather feedback from all the different people that are interested in the technology, the users of the technology, the people who support the technology, to make sure that we haven't gotten off base with our IS strategic plan. Now, this just lays out some of the things that we just talked about. You're going to have your operational plan. You're going to conduct a cost-benefit analysis, which is pretty difficult to do, but that's another discussion in and of itself. Then as far as actually acquiring the applications or the systems, there's the traditional systems development life cycle that I would say very few people actually use. Because it's so long and nobody's got time or money to do this type of system development. Very few people have the time to do this, because you're going to do a systems investigation. It's going to include a feasibility analysis, a financial analysis, and whether or not a social analysis, some type. We'll see it on the next slide or two. That's going to determine, if we build this thing, will the people even use it? It's not like the movie, if you build it, they will come, because it's not always that way. You can develop a great system, but if your users don't want it or your users won't use it, then you've wasted time. So you've got to do systems investigation, systems analysis, system design, system programming, then you've got to test it, then you've got to implement it. Then you've got to go back and double check the operations and make sure it works. If at any point something's wrong, then you back up to the level to fix it and you keep coming down. And so you don't actually implement the system until it's pretty well foolproof. You're always going to have to make changes. You're always going to have to upgrade it. But finally, you get down to the level of maintenance. Also, at any point, you could also just pull the plug on the whole thing. So the system development life cycle, advantages, control, accountability, and error detection. Major major flaws or drawbacks. It's very inflexible, it's time-consuming, expensive, and it discourages changes once user requirements are done. Now let's look back at this. Let's say that in your systems investigation and analysis you determine what your users' needs are, but by the time you get down to step 6 of implementation, those user needs have changed. The market's changed, the products have changed, the customers have changed. And so it's actually at this point very logical before you implement something to go back and make revisions. But you've got so much time and money invested, the organization just says, hey, just get it out. Okay, just get the system out, just get it finished, then we'll do something with it later. And so because it's so structured, it doesn't welcome change when the change needs to take place. This talks about some of the feasibility studies, the designs of the SDLC. Most of this chapter is about the SDLC, and then section 10.4 talks about alternative methods and tools. There's prototyping, where you come up with an idea and say, okay, let's throw something together, and you put it out and let people test it. A lot of times you call that a beta version. You put out a beta, let people test it, give you feedback on it, then you make changes. You put it back out, let people fix it. Prototyping can be much quicker. Prototyping can also be much more time consuming. Prototyping can get lost and get away from the organizational mission because you've got so many people involved in the process. Same thing with joint application design, Rapid application design. All of these rest of these that don't use the structure of the SDLC can get away from the point and away from the mission. This gives you some of the other alternatives. And finally, there's outsourcing and application service providers. Let's say you don't want to develop it. Maybe you don't have the resources. Maybe you can't hire a developer to work for you full time when you only need some type of application development done once every 5 years. So you outsource. Outsourcing's fine. Outsourcing sometimes can lead to other problems because you've got to have legal agreements. You've got to have a lot of trust in the people that you're outsourcing to, because many times you're allowing them to come in and see your business processes, to see your business needs, to see very intimate parts of your organization that you wouldn't want just anybody to look at. Well, then if they come in, what if your competitor also comes in and starts to work with them? It's possible that they could share information with them. It would be illegal. They might get caught. They might go to jail, but the damage could already be done. So outsourcing, you have to really trust the people and have good legal agreements and good relationships with them to allow them to develop your applications. Application service providers is much the same way, except they provide a service and then you just don't have to worry about it. There's a lot of organizations that are starting to use application service providers for some things that everybody has to do, like accounting, inventory management, supply chain management, things that everybody has to do that is pretty much runs the same across the board in organizations. You can use application service providers for that. Here's some people's view of outsourcing. Take the first door on your right, and that door takes you right on out the door. They want to do everything in-house. Finally, then, this last section here talks about vendor selection, service level agreements, and then you've got your closing case. So this final chapter gives you all the different options for how to acquire the systems. First, you've got to, no matter what you do, you've got to do the investigation internally as to what you've got within your organization, what you need, and where you're going. Then you've got to determine how to get it. Either build it yourself, if that's the question, then you need to figure out how you're going to build it. Which system are you going to follow? SDLC, prototyping, joint application, rapid application. Which of those options are you going to go with? If you don't want to build it yourself, then you've got application service providers or outsourcing as your other alternatives. So if you have any questions, give me a call or shoot me an email. Otherwise, this closes the textbook for this course. It's, like I said before, it's a pretty easy read. It's a basic textbook, but it gives you a good overview of the technology that we're going to be discussing throughout the rest of this semester.